this webinar series here this last 3 weeks. Over 4 hours of your personal time invested in it. And I really, truly thank you for your time. And I hope that you're able to pull some of the wisdom out of this and are able to generate more sales, more volume for yourself in 2021 and get a good kickstart into what this new year looks like and what the new is for us, because there's no normal as we know it. Everything has changed. The script has been ripped up and we're starting from a blank slate, really. And I think what Caryn has showed us here in the last 2 sessions has really opened my eyes, and I hope it's done something for you guys too, that you'll see some opportunities now in a different light, a different format. And I think that's what excites me the most. Today, we're basically going to have a sales huddle. We're going to talk a variety of topics, getting in the door most sought after prospects, sales matching, prospect silence, closing strategies, just to name a few. So with that being said, we're 1 minute in, so we got good participation crowd going. If you want to turn your videos on, please do so that we can get a little more interaction going. And I'm going to turn it over to you, Caryn. Let's rock and roll.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. I still see the numbers are climbing, but we're going to get started. And the very first thing I want to start with, and the way we're going to handle this sales huddle, is that when you have your questions, if you could just put them in the chat, and then Perry's going to monitor the chat, and I'll just start answering the questions one by one. So start thinking about the questions you've had from the last week for the sales activity that you've done. And it could be anything from getting in the door, you got a proposal stuck in the pipeline, so your prospect is not answering you, you have silence, what's going on, you've maybe met with somebody 2 or 3 times, and so now what? It could be any of those things that are stopping you from creating the revenue you want for yourself and filling the pipeline the way you feel it should be filled. So let's get started in the chat. Before we hit the questions, tell me one thing, or it could be 2, that stuck out for you from last session where we did the sales messaging workshop. Anybody can, but not everyone can, for example, or the week before that where we did building and rebuilding your sales pipeline. Name one thing that really stuck out for you and one thing that you implemented in the last week. And those could be 2 separate things. Let's start seeing the chat. Who's going to be first?
I'm glad they're all jumping into it. It's like
pick up the phone.
Luke, you had some good feedback last time. I know that you got it going. Okay, here we go. Pick up the phone.
Yeah, thanks, Brad. Absolutely. I mean, there are so many people who are sending emails, but the prospects are receiving so many emails. And it's hard for people to go through them all. What your competitors are not doing, they're not picking up the phone. So if you pick up the phone, you win. People are sitting there by their phones. It's just a matter of calling them and saying something that's important, which is Luke's comment, what's in it for them right away, and doing some research on that too. What can you do as far as research goes to find out what's important to these people before you pick up the phone, so that when you pick up the phone, you're saying something that's incredibly valuable to them. Using stronger, more powerful language. Yeah, Dana, thank you. We talked about the power of words. And when you change a word, it can change the outcome. If you change a phrase, it can change the outcome. If you change a question, it can change the outcome of your dialogue path. So to be deliberate and to choose words that really work hard for you. Yeah, Matthew, under what circumstances? I can't even begin to tell you how many times that's gotten stuck sales to close. Under what circumstances would the prospects say yes? And sometimes you have to do some real brainstorming around that, as we talked about last time. Set team meetings to video chat. So Jennifer, what do you mean by that? Set team meetings to, you mean turn video on. That's what I think you mean by that. Yes, turn video on. The prospects want that. They really want this more personal connection. And like, even though many of us are missing seeing people in person, if you were going to see them in person, it's going to be like this. Whereas right now you could see right into their homes, you could see their kids, you could see their pets, and it creates a much more personal relationship a lot faster. So definitely turn video on, but then of course, when you do turn your video on, you have to be ready for it, right? Make sure that you've turned off the pop-up notifications like Teams and things like that, that there are constantly going off, especially if you're showing your screen. When you show your screen, make sure you're showing the right screen. Not just everything that's open on your desktop, so people can see things that you don't want them to see. Close out of things that people shouldn't be seeing of yours and be deliberate in terms of what they see. Let's see, Rod said, turn an email from a client happy with the project into a request for referrals in their organization. Yes, absolutely. And what do you guys remember is the phrase, instead of asking for a referral, what is the phrase that we talked about? What do you say instead of, can I have a referral? Instead of using that word, who remembers? Introduction? Nope, there was a phrase, it's 2 words when you ask somebody. Does anybody remember? Yes, what else and who else? So the phrase is, Matthew, that's great. Who else? Who else do you know, either inside your organization or outside your organization, who has a need and would value this introduction? Thank you so much. And then when you do ask for the who else question, you want to ask for an email introduction. So that means you maintain control over the sales process. If you ask for an email introduction, the person who's introducing you has you on the email and the person you're being introduced to, and that gives you permission to communicate using email. It also makes sure it happens sooner rather than later. One of the ways you can use your CRM, if somebody says they will introduce you, put it in the CRM and set a task for yourself for next week to make sure that the introduction happened. Sometimes people with the best of intentions say they're going to make the introductions and then they don't, just because they get busy and they forget, not because they don't want to. So you can send them a reminder, but only if you remember. And one of the best ways to do that is to set a task for yourself in the CRM to see next week by this time, if you haven't gotten the introduction, that you'll ping that person and just say, would you be so kind as to send that email introduction? I'd really appreciate it. Thank you. So yes, so the what else and the who else. What else? Anything else stick out for anybody? We've got some good ones in there. Okay, awesome. And so last time I had asked if anybody had reached out to any new prospects, and there were a few people who had and people who had not. So I did say I was going to ask today how many prospects. I asked you guys to commit to 2, and it could be somebody you know who you needed to re-engage. It could be somebody who was brand new to you or somebody who was a new decision maker in a current client. So if you did that since then, put yes in the chat. Let's see who did that. Yes, Jennifer, awesome. Who else? Stacy, great. John, great. Luke did it. April, also great. Jeff did. Rod did. Okay. So for those of you, okay, well, let's see. Brad, sadly, no. Okay, Brad, what held you back this week? Not to pick on you, but let's give you some suggestions and ideas of how that you could fit this business development into a busy week. So Brad, what held you back from being able to set time aside to reach out to the 2? Let's see what Brad says. Brad got busy. Yeah. And you know what? That's going to happen. You guys, the industry that you're in is an immediate kind of industry. And it could happen that even with the best of intentions, that there was not another minute in the day, not another minute in the week. I totally understand. It happens to me too. So let's hear from some of you. And then I'm going to give my suggestions as well. What are some of the ideas that you would give to Brad for a week that is completely full? I mean, really full, 14-hour days, and he still hasn't read all of his email or gotten to all of the orders. What are some of the things that might help him to fit business development into a week like that? Oh, Brad says no excuse. You're being too easy. Okay, but let's set some ideas. Yes, put it on the calendar. 1 hour power a day, good one. Schedule it. What can you delegate? Yeah, these are some really good ideas. So I absolutely agree is to schedule it into your day and then consider that as firm as a new prospect meeting with the prospect you've been trying to meet for 5 years and couldn't. That's how serious it is. Nothing should get in the way of that power hour, I saw it called. Yes, nothing should get in the way. It's as firm as if you had a meeting with a new prospect and you would never cancel one of those. And the best way to do that is to turn off everything, like turn off your email if you can, turn off your cell phone, turn off everything, and then just focus on that narrow group of high priority prospects. And we talked about that in the first session, building and rebuilding your sales pipeline in a virtual world. Not all prospects were created equally. They don't all deserve your attention, but some of them really do. So when you do sit down in that power hour or the block of time that you consider as firm as a prospect meeting, make sure you go back to that group of prospects, the high priority ones, and don't get distracted by this and this and this and this, because otherwise the hour will go past and then you won't have done that. There's a different mindset associated with pursuing prospects that are further into the pipeline as well as new clients versus those who are brand new. And there's a different cadence of that workflow. For the people who are new, you need to go slower. You need to really think about these people. And if you were them, what would you need to hear in order to take a meeting with you, even though you already have vendors who are doing fairly well and you know other people who do what you do? What is it that would make those people take the meeting? And with those thoughts in mind, you're going to pick up the phone and try to get them live. If not, you're going to leave a well thought out voicemail, 6 sentences max. If you reach them on the phone, it's 2 sentences and a question. On my website, I have articles, and I think, Perry, I sent those to you, right? The 6 sentence voicemail and what happens when you reach them live.
Yes, we did. We share that.
Okay,
And if you
good.
don't have it, ask me and I'll send it back out to everybody. But I know that your owners, your partners, principals have copies of those too.
Yeah, okay, great. And so you're going to have a well thought out voicemail. The 2 sentences in the question are well thought out ahead of time when you reach them, and also the email. We had talked about some good email etiquette. So you don't want something that's really long. You want to say something that's important to them. Get rid of the salesy, cutesy kinds of things. The decision makers really just have a lot of work to do. Don't make them work so hard to know what you want. If you want a meeting, ask for one, put it in the first sentence. I'm writing to you to get time on your calendar, and then give them an important reason why saying yes would be the best decision they make all week. And we also know that it's not going to take just one call, right? One email. We're going to call them back next week and the week after and the week after, and we can't say the same thing. One of the ways that we do this from a door opening perspective with our clients is our people will note in the CRM, not just the email that they sent, but the theme of the voicemail, so that next week they're saying something different and bringing the relationship to a deeper level. And that may sound strange to you, because what kind of relationship do you have with somebody you haven't spoken to? But when they see your email and they hear your voicemail, even if they don't call back, they're hearing you, they're hearing a person, and they are getting to know you, even though you may not have talked to them yet. They are hearing from you. That's why adding voice is so important to this, that it's not just email where they can casually just move over that. They're hearing from you. There's a person here. And most people, most of them, not all of them, are pretty respectful when they're at work. And if you are reaching out to them respectfully, it'll take some time, but they will respond to you, or they'll pick up at another time and they'll know you already. And then you start your conversation from a further place. Let's see what else. Rod says, what can you delegate? Yes, absolutely. There's another article, and Perry, I don't know if I gave this one to you, called the NNR exercise.
No, I don't have that one.
Okay, so Heather, make a note. We'll get that over to Perry. The NNR exercise is about time management, which is not a new concept to anybody on this call. But here's what it'll do for you. When you keep track of time in quarter hour increments over the course of 2 weeks, you're going to know where your time is going. At the end of 2 weeks, and this is not, that part is not a new concept in time management, but here's what's new, is that for every quarter hour increment, put an N next to anything that's non-revenue generating in terms of an activity, and an R next to anything that is a revenue generating activity, and then add it all up. It's very surprising to people when they look at their own time in categories of N and R that they're spending a lot of time on N, which is at the expense of R. Then we take a look at N. What doesn't need to be done at all? Like sometimes there are things in that N category that you really don't need to be doing at all. So what can you completely stop doing? What can you delegate? To Rod's point, what can you delegate to somebody else? Is there something that you're keeping for yourself that somebody else really could do, leaving you with more time for a higher payoff activity, right? So really think about and scrutinize what you might be able to give to somebody else. And for those of the owners who are on this call, we really need to think carefully because, you know, look, I run a company too. And sometimes I ask my people to pull information or give me a report or go help another person who might need some help and ideas and advice. And all of the time that I'm asking my people to go do that is time that's taken from our revenue generating activities. Is there somebody else who can do that training for the people who need to up their ante and up their skills? Is there somebody else who could put together that report? Maybe an admin can put together the report. Does it need to be done by the producer, right? Because the producer needs to do what only the producer can do, which is get on the phone and write the emails and bring these prospects through the sales pipeline so that there is revenue. So let me stop there and ask if anybody has any questions about N and R, revenue generating activity versus non-revenue generating activities. Questions there? No. Who's going to do that? You can raise your hand for those of you with video on. For those of you with video off, you can, I don't know, I think I could still see a raised hand with an emoji, right? Good idea. What's one, okay, thanks, John. What's one non-revenue generating activity that you can stop doing? Put that in the chat. That will leave more time for revenue generating activities. Let's see just one. Cleaning my office.
I could tell you one that I've heard a lot of is finding a better way to do fulfillment and kitting projects and taking away the salesperson's time doing that responsibility and having different team members being delegated to that responsibility. That's definitely sapped a lot of our people's resources this past 60, 90 days. So yeah, that's one that I know of.
Yeah, absolutely. Reporting, taking personal calls, reading all the news articles on Yahoo. There's, you know, especially for people who don't love prospecting. I mean, there are people who love prospecting. I would rather prospect than almost anything else. It really floats my boat to learn about new people, figure out what I could say that would cause somebody to go further in a conversation versus when they don't go further in a conversation. That's my little dweeby thing. I really like it. But for those people who don't love that part of the job, but who need to do that part of the job because you don't get to close a sale unless you actually open the door, it's going to be harder for you to keep yourself focused on business development. It is hard. And that's why setting that time block is so important and not letting anything else creep in, not the personal calls, not the texts, not the reading of anything else, is to just focus on the people who are on your list, who and doing activities of quality. It's not about just 10 calls. It's about 10 effective calls that move your relationship from one step to the next. If you're just sinking in the calls, but they're crappy calls, you might as well not do it at all. I'd rather see you make 2 calls, write 2 emails that are effective and good than 10 that are ineffective and might stop you from having a relationship with those people. And by the way, when you're writing your emails, before you hit send, please proof them, because you guys are in a detail-oriented business. And when you're in a detail-oriented business, the details really matter. And somebody said to Perry that they'd like to hear more stories from me, so I'll tell you a story. There's one of our clients in the meeting planning industry, which is also a very detail-oriented business. He had a grid that when people asked him for a proposal, he would put all the specs into this grid and then send it out. Well, the grid had a G missing in the line that read grand total. Okay, you can't make this stuff up, you guys. You know, the G was missing in the line that said grand total. And I said to him, please, Francesco, I'm begging you, put the G in your template for grand total, because they're not going to look at any other line but that. And if you're going to make a typo there, what are they going to think you're going to do with the name badges at the meeting? Put the G in the grand total. He didn't do it. He had other things to do. Finally, we're coming towards April, and I said to him, for my birthday, would you please put the G in the grand total? My company does door opening for them, and it's a bad reflection on the professionalism of our people if when he sends out a proposal, there's a G missing in the grand total. So while you might think that that's silly and it's such a small thing, it can really damage your ability to get the meeting, get the sale. I can't tell you I mean, I think I showed you guys that LinkedIn where it said hi and it said contact name here. And this was a guy who was trying to open up a relationship with me. I'll never do business with his company, because
So
if that's what he did when he's trying to impress me most, what's he going to do when he's supporting me? Perry, you want to say something?
yeah, so Janet put a nice comment in the chat here. She would love if the accounting department tracked on collection so she could sell instead. Very, very important thing. But you know, that's a conversation that you as a salesperson or an AE needs to take up the ladder with your management team, because that is a direct line responsibility, and there may be reasons that they involve you, and there may be timeline that says, you know, after 90 days we bring you into it. But that's a management type of conversation that you really need to elevate that conversation with.
Yes, agreed. And doing the N&R exercise is a great way to foster that management conversation. I mean, I did this, not in your industry, it was with a company that makes helicopters. Like think of how important the details are in a helicopter, right? So I had the whole sales team go through the N&R exercise, and then I facilitated the conversation with management. And it was really interesting because one of the people was cleaning the conference room where she was entertaining, before COVID, of course, entertaining people who came in to meet with her. But the people were eating, the employees were eating in the conference room, and they were leaving it a mess with the garbage and everything. And so she was cleaning the conference room, took her half an hour every day. That was times 5 days a week. That's all outreach time. And the CEO who was sitting at the table had no idea that was happening. He said, what happened to the custodian? Because we have a custodian in that office. And apparently the custodian was sick and he was out and nobody was doing it. And the CEO had no idea. So by doing this exercise and then bringing it to the owner and saying, okay, here's all my N. This is what I think should come off my plate. Let's say it is collections, but there could be other things, the reports. There could be other things that the CEO of your company would say, hey, listen, don't do that anymore. And you just have now three hours a week, every week, for more revenue generating activities. Absolutely.
And you
Okay.
could justify that because your managers and your bosses are looking for more revenue. They're pushing you to go out and sell. They're wanting you to bring home more ROI for not only yourself, but for the company. So, you know, you can easily take that triple N conversation up the ladder and go, hey guys, here is why I need this to be worked out properly so that I can spend more time doing what I need to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's take some questions. Although, is Danny Rosen on the call? Because Danny said that he was going to call, was it 200 people? Is that what he said, Perry, at the end of last call? I was just asking for a commitment of 2 people, but Danny said he was going to call 200.
Yeah, that's Danny for you, and I think Danny is somewhere in the pipeline. I saw him before. He is out there. He's on mute. I should unmute him and just bring him into the group here.
Yeah.
You think I should do that, or is that totally rude?
Yeah, Danny, are you on the call? Put it in the chat. Can we call on you to find out how your 200 calls went?
Let's see if he chimes in. He might chime in a couple minutes here.
Okay. Well, in the meantime, while we're waiting to find out how Danny's 200 calls went, let's start getting some questions in the chat. What questions do you have about either the content that we covered, or when you did your calls, when you wrote your emails, a place where you're stuck? Let's start fielding some questions. And I have questions here in case nobody asks me. I have a lot of questions here. I can ask myself.
I'm here if you guys can hear me too.
Okay, Danny, how did it go?
Well, so I got to be honest, I didn't get there. It was more of sort of me being excited and wanting to just kind of push myself. Robert Fiveash, my business partner, and I have this ongoing challenge of trying to do outreach at the top. So we try and, I don't know, activate, I think the catch and release mode, where as owners, we have an opportunity in peer-to-peer format to reach out to senior level folks and ask for that door to be opened. Something I learned from you, Caryn, years ago, and then to warm up the leads as much as possible, then bring the team in and hand them off. 200 was extreme. I got through about 38.
That's great.
So I think I failed, but I'm still getting some feedback. A lot of people are ignoring me, but it's kind of a numbers game. There are a couple doors that were open and some conversations that are started that I think will turn into clients.
Well, that's great. Well, I wouldn't say it's a failure. I'd say 38 is a success, because anything that's more than 0 is a success. So I would look at it that way. But maybe share with everybody, like pick 1 or 2 that you asked for an introduction and you got one to the person you wanted. How did that happen for you? What did you ask, and what happened as a result so far?
Yeah, I had 2 types of outreaches, and Robert and I have sort of decided to use LinkedIn as our platform versus email. We don't have all the email addresses, so I started out building a list, and then the 2 pathways. One was the person I wanted to try and sell to and have the conversation with. The other was asking for an introduction. So we kept the inquiry simple. That they were maybe a little more than a sentence, but I always added something that was personal or flavorful. So like this past Monday after the Super Bowl, I remember sending one out that said, "How was the weekend?" You guys get that. And people responded to that. Yesterday, after one of the Supremes died, which I'm really into music, I found some people that were into music that I knew liked music. And I sent a link to the Supremes on Soul Train, and that opened a door. So I used this personal approach, and that started the conversation that then was the second to, "Hey, I'd love to have a conversation with you about how we can help you during this crazy time." And, that's starting to unfold, as I mentioned.
Right. Okay. Well, that's great. Let me ask you, how, aside from the music connection, which I think is really an interesting way to go, how did you select the people on the short list that you were asking for those introductions? What was the criteria that you thought about in order to put them on your short list?
Yeah, we went through an exercise at Brandfield about 1.5 years ago where we identified our ideal client. And so some of those, the selections that were on my list were companies in specific markets with specific job titles. A number of employees was a big one. One way that I'm trying to get in, most of the contacts I have are in marketing, but we're seeing a lot of growth in the human resources department where there's a lot of budget there. So my ask would be for existing customers and relationships into human resources, and then to talk about the services that we're offering there. I also think the number of offices was something that was important on our list. If there were disparate offices or decentralized purchases that were happening and we could kind of gauge, we would identify them. And then, I would look at their websites and what they're doing in the marketplace, their social media handles, see if they're doing anything cool and interesting that that we could sort of grab onto and make it hyper personal based on their existing marketing activities.
Yeah, yeah, all things that are good. I mean, there are several things that I want to comment on. First of all, the selection of the prospects and the disparate offices, decentralized decision making. As you know, decentralized decision making, it's a whole lot easier to get the first order than if you have to go through the big RFP process and there's one vendor for everybody. So that's a strategic choice that either you or the owners will make as to what defines an important win. But it is certainly a lot easier to go after decentralized when there's decentralized purchasing. However, when there is centralized purchasing, it doesn't mean that there's no opportunity for you. There's all sorts of ancillary products, services, things like that that fall outside of the bounds of what constitutes centralized purchasing. And I can share with you an experience that we had door opening several years ago. We were targeting insurance on behalf of a promotional products company. And the door opener was talking to many different people. They wanted a certain geography, our client did. And so we were prospecting, and the door opener was talking with one person, that person said, listen, all the decisions are made out of a different area because of the centralized purchasing. And so instead of just saying thank you, and because the area wasn't part of the area that my client wanted, that was the end of it, the door opener said, all decisions, or are there any orders or certain types of orders that are not part of that? And so that additional question ended up creating a further path of dialogue. And so the person that my person was talking to said, well, you know, any orders of 10,000 pieces or less don't go through centralized purchasing. So the door opener said, okay, well, who handles that? And she said, well, I do. And then the door opener said, well, how can we start a conversation about that? And she said, we could just start it now. And so just by saying that, one more question led to a path of dialogue, and that prospect became a client for my client. But had the door opener not asked that secondary question, it never would have led to that path of dialogue, and there wouldn't be a closed sale there. That client was able to then later compete for the bigger business, which was kind of interesting too. Never would have had that opportunity if it wasn't for that other question, right? So Danny, there was one thing that you said in there that I would like to change. So what you said was, I would love to meet with you. I don't love the word love. It's not in business. I know why you would love to meet with the prospect, but what I don't know is why the prospect would love to meet with you. And that is what we want to articulate when it comes to prospects and asking for anything, including the initial meeting. So I'm sure there are a lot of people who use that. It's pretty universal, but think of it as fluff, because you're using up words that aren't going to work hard for you. Because that word or that phrase, I would love to meet with you, is very much about you, and it has nothing to do with the prospect. So that's one thing I would like to suggest that you change. So Matthew asked, Danny, what is your plan of attack for the initial meeting call once you have it booked with a new prospect after connecting on LinkedIn? So Matthew, what do you mean by the plan of attack? Do you mean how the initial conversation happens? And maybe Heather, can you take Matthew Nutt off of mute so he could talk to us?
While we're waiting for Matthew, I'm not going to use the word love in conversation with any of my customers anymore, or any prospects, but I will use it with my wife many more times. I'll take all the energy and push it into my wife. She'll appreciate that. So thanks, Caryn.
Well, you know, Valentine's Day is coming, but that's actually a different kind of a huddle. That's not Sales Huddle. We'll stick with Sales today, but I'm sure she'll appreciate that. Do we have Matthew? Heather, is he off mute?
Muted. I'm free.
Woohoo!
No, right? My question really is just, I guess, Danny, what would you deem, like, what's success for you with the initial call? Is it more of a discovery call? Do you go in with like the stance of a specific product that's new and that's the interesting sizzle? Or does that make sense? Does my question make sense, Caryn?
Yeah.
Like, what's the plan attack and
Yeah,
what's
so I'm going to
considered?
let Danny answer, and then I'm going to come in with some suggestions as well. So Danny, go ahead.
Karen's she's gonna lay down the hammer and let me know.
Only
how
if
I
you
can
say
improve.
love.
Yeah. And I do appreciate the feedback because we're all here to grow and learn. I've been doing this a long time, and I constantly learn. So the tips are appreciated. So Matthew, you mentioned discovery. That's the thing. When we were younger and not really in tune with how to appropriately sell to a customer or prospect, we would talk about how many awards we won, how good looking we were, how much we could get better prices, and how fast we were. Some of that stuff's like, the cost of entry now. Everybody's got the same products and pricing and service levels and art and creative. So we learned to ask good discovery questions. So we are not prospecting companies, again, that we don't think would be good fits for Brand Fuel at this time. And so we are asking specific questions to those specific people to sort of lead them down the path of, we're having pain here, or we have an opportunity here. So it's all discovery. And we have a series of those that our team has. They're called the Pirate Booty questions, and they're broken down by department to kind of get the dialogue going. We've always found that the more they talk, the more they like us, which has been really helpful. And then we do some off-the-cuff demos. Sometimes they'll say something that triggers, like what Karen's doing right now. We're all asking her to tell us more stories, experiences you've had, because those are the things that we feel like people are remembering us by. And if we can get them excited and connected to some of the storytelling and the experiences that we had and the off-the-cuff creative ideas, what do you think about this? Is this something you'd like to consider doing? Our goal is to make sure we have a follow-up activity, an action item. And then at the end of the call, we basically say, okay, here's what you said. Here's what we talked about as the action item. If we get this information over to you by this date, is that good? And then can we follow up with you? Because we think this actually might help you with blank.
Okay, that's awesome. And so I'm going to add to that. I'm going to tweak the end of what Danny just said. So at the end of every meeting, there is always a next step, date, and time. It is the single easiest way to shorten your sales cycle, is to always have a date and time at the end of every meeting. That, of course, means that the meeting needs to be structured in a way where it's obvious to the prospect that a next meeting makes sense. So I suggest, instead of asking, can we have a next meeting, structure the dialogue path so that the next meeting is obvious. And when you summarize, like, so here's what we talked about, and here's what you wanted me to get for you, here's what you said you would get for me, how long approximately is it going to take for you to get whatever it is? Let's say they wanted to collect something to give to you, or if they wanted to bring another person into the meeting, and they might say, well, it'll probably take me a couple of days. And you could say, okay, it's Wednesday. Let's look at Monday. How's Monday at 10? And then what's going to happen is the prospect is, if you're in person or even on a Zoom call, they're going to start looking at their calendar, and the discussion turns to date and time. So it's no longer a question of whether there will be a meeting. Of course, there will be a meeting. Now it's just a matter of what time is the time that works. So what's going to happen in that case is sometimes people will say to you, well, I can't commit to a full meeting because I have to check with Tom, Dick, and Sally. And you say, okay, no problem. It'll take you, a couple of days to check with Tom, Dick, and Sally. Yeah, about 10 days, a couple of days, let's say. And you say, okay, no problem. Let's take a look at Monday at 10, and we'll do just a 10-minute check-in call just to keep us moving. And the 10-minute check-in call goes on the calendar as a meeting, but for 10 minutes. And that way, that'll keep you moving. If you do, and I had given you this tip last time, but if you set a Zoom meeting, which I highly recommend video, you'll want to say to that person, why don't we exchange remote office numbers, which is the same as a cell phone number, just in case the technology fails, because everybody's had experience where technology fails. And if you exchange the phone number, you have a way to get in touch with them. But more important than that, you now have their cell phone number and permission to use it. So you can text them a confirmation of the meeting coming up, and that will put you in touch with each other. And that cell phone number is going to be very helpful for you for a long, long time through the entire sales process. I'm going to share my screen for a second. Can you guys see the meeting planning form? Yes. Okay. So we'll get this over to you also, Perry, so you could share it with everybody. So this is what we give to our clients to help them to get ready for the meetings that our door openers set for them. But I highly recommend that you do this for yourself. Many people will get onto a first meeting and wing it. Not a great idea. It doesn't take a long time. I like to say 3 minutes of preparation on the front end can mean $3 million on the back end, but only if you actually prepare for the meeting. So I'll just walk you through what this form looks like, and then we'll send you a link. I think we've got a fillable form now. And so here you just put the company name, the location, the date of the meeting, the prospect participants, and your internal participants. It's important to know who's coming from the prospect side, because you're going to do some research ahead of time. So you're going to fill in the background information. What's everything you know about these people? Everything. And then you're going to do some research on LinkedIn. You'll Google search the company. One of the things that I really like to do is to take a look on a company's website and look for the CEO's letter. A lot of times the CEO writes a letter every year, and you want to find out what's important to the CEO, because you can always pull that into the conversations you have in your meetings. So, and then the meeting objective, yours. Most people, when I ask them, what's your objective? They say to close a sale. And I'll say, okay, great. Is that going to happen in the first meeting? And they say, not always. And I'll say, okay, if you can't close a sale in the first meeting, what's your meeting objective? And so that's when we really get down to the brass tacks. What do they want as an outcome from this meeting? And you're going to want to put that down. And here's a hint. One of the things that's going to be on that list is a date and time for the next meeting. That is the barometer by which you're going to judge a successful meeting, that you've gotten a date and time for the next meeting. If you don't ask, I would say the meeting is an F. If you do ask, but you're given some pushback, you still have done a good job. Okay. And then what's the prospect's objective? A lot of people forget about this, that the prospect actually has an objective for coming to this call. What does that person want to get out of it? So if you want to close a sale and that person just wants to learn about you, you have a pretty big gap. How are you going to fill that gap? With the questions that you ask and the dialogue path that you take, because it's your responsibility to make sure that you're filling the gap, or the prospect is not going to feel value out of that meeting. And that's really important, that the prospect has value. High gain questions to ask. Okay, so here's the structure of the meeting. When you sit down with somebody, whether it's virtual or in person, you're going to remind them where you left off last, whether it was a previous meeting, or you spoke to them on the phone, or they raised a hand from some marketing that you were doing, or they responded to something on LinkedIn. Like, here's where we left off last. We're having this conversation because you wanted to know blah, 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 like that. And so that's like 3 or 4 sentences right there. And what that does is they will then be in what I call your conversation funnel. So this isn't your sales funnel. This is the funnel that is a conversation. And when they enter that conversation, they may not even be in your funnel. They may be thinking about something else. They might be thinking about what they're going to get their spouse for Valentine's Day. They might be thinking about something that has nothing to do with you or this conversation. So these couple of sentences, the 3 or 4 sentences, are going to take these people from being over here, and they're going to put them at the top of your conversation funnel. Your job is to lead them to the bottom of the conversation funnel. And at the bottom of the conversation funnel is, what do you think it is? Somebody put, I lost my chat when I showed my screen. Perry, what are people saying the bottom of the conversation funnel is?
Nothing yet. Waiting for it. Okay, date, time for next action.
Absolutely. You guys got it. Date and time. At the bottom of the conversation funnel is the date and time. Right above the date and time is the summary of the next steps. Okay, to Danny's point. All right, so the high gain questions to ask. After your 3 or 4 sentences, you're going to ask 3, maybe 4 high gain questions. Why don't you, let's put in the chat what you think some of these high gain questions are. Let's hear, what do people think? I finally got my chat open. Okay. Who's got one? A high gain question. This is a question that you're going to ask in a first meeting for somebody new. It's a new prospect. What are you going to ask? I may pick on Danny if nobody puts one in there. What are your challenges? Okay, good. What else? What else would you ask?
Okay.
What isn't working now that we can help you with? Great. That's a gap question.
The one question I like to ask is, what does your next 6 months look like in projects? Where are you gonna? What looks down the road? What's in the pipeline that we could start talking about and having a conversation on?
Right. I like that question too. But the thing is, what I like to do is I like to ask that question ahead of time, but that doesn't work well in an email. It works well if you're actually talking to somebody on the phone and you agree to a first meeting. I like to ask that question. So what's coming down the pike that I could show you some ideas for, or what are the next couple of projects that you have on your desk? What's something you have on your desk that you're looking for ideas for? And although that's poor grammar and I understand that, but asking that question, there was a retailer, I won't tell you which one, and our door opener had gotten a meeting with one of the subsidiaries of the retailer, but they had several different groups. And the meeting, before setting the date and time for the meeting, asked the question, what do you have on your desk? There was something that the buyer had on the desk and just hadn't had a chance to pick up the phone and call the current vendor. So our client went on the meeting and had ideas that our client closed that client on that program, and now works with all of the other subsidiaries as well. So just asking that question ahead of the meeting can get you that much further. If you can't ask it ahead of the meeting, I like that question during the meeting. Okay, how are you incentivizing employees? Yes, especially for human resources. What projects have you executed in the past? Yeah, in fact, Matthew, I would ask which ones have they liked best? Which ones had worked best for them of the projects that executed in the past? And then I would ask them why. Like, why was that one so good? And perhaps they're looking to do more of that. Or are they looking to repeat it? Are they looking to have a similar kind of outcome? And how will your business change this year? Yeah, here are a couple that I like to ask in a first meeting. The first one is, tell me a little bit about your role and how you're structured here. Now, I would expect that you're doing research on LinkedIn anyway, but people don't always update their LinkedIn. Like when you looked at their LinkedIn, they might have been over one area, but maybe they haven't had a chance to update it, and now they're over 3 other areas. And when you have the conversation, you may only talk about one, which is still good, but you might leave a lot of opportunity on the table by not asking that question. I like to ask what's important to you in a partner or a vendor. What more would you like from your current vendor than you're currently getting? That's a gap question. I'm just reading you a list, but you'll want to pick like 3 or 4. And then tell me more about that. What kinds of needs do you have coming down the pike? We already talked about that. Will you be making the decision, or will there be others involved in making the decision? That's a nice way of asking if they're a decision maker, because you can't sit there and say, are you a decision maker? People don't really like that. I like to stay away from yes/no questions wherever possible. So the one that I just gave you was a yes/no that's turned into a non-yes/no by adding the or. And I'll read it to you again. Will you be making the decision, or will there be others involved in making the decision? If somebody says others are involved in making the decision, you want to know what's important to them in picking a vendor. What more would they want from their current vendors than they're currently getting? And the reason why that's important is because different things are important to different people. And if you only focus your conversation and your dialogue on what's important to one, you may miss one of the other people. In fact, if you have multiple people from the prospect side on your Zoom call, you're going to want to ask these questions of the different people individually. Let's see what we have. Oh, this one is one of my favorites. This one will eke out the surprise decision makers early on. So if after this meeting, everything we talk about is nirvana for you, what's the process for us working together? Who else needs to be involved and what paperwork needs to be signed? Let's fish that out right up front so that there's not a surprise decision maker that comes in at the end. And then what deliverables do you expect from the project, and by when do you want it completed, and why is that important to you? Asking why it's important to them will help you later on if the proposal stalls and you're having trouble getting them to re-engage. You can pick up on something they told you was important to them and then remind them about that and use that as a reason to keep going. Let's see. So any others that I missed that you guys? Let's see. Oh, you want a list of questions? Sure. I'll get you, Heather, just write that down. We're going to get that list to over to Perry. I have, it's like a ready reference. It's that, those are for door opening. I also have a list in the pre-proposal stage and a couple of closing questions. So I can send that over to you. Okay, let's continue going through this. So those are the high gain questions to ask. If you don't like how your meetings are going, you're going to want to take a look at the questions you're asking. If you're not getting the outcomes you want from your meeting and you believe this is the right prospect, chances are you're asking the wrong questions. Change the question, change path of dialogue. And then you're going to think about what objections would this person have? And you're going to think about the answers. Once you come up with the answers, it's kind of like that same thing we did with the messaging. You're going to put the hat of the prospect on and feel how that answer lands on you with your prospect's hat on. Would you nod and say, oh yeah, I got it, and then keep moving? Or would you still have the objection? If you would still have the objection, then the objection response is not strong enough. And it's really important that you go back to the drawing board and get that objection response nailed. And remember, you have the framework now for, I already have a vendor for that, or I know other people who do what you do. That's when you're going to go right into that. Anyone can, but not everyone can, for example. So you're going to want to pre-think that before you meet with your prospect. And the general meeting structure, what I mean by this is time management. If you have a half an hour for a meeting, by how many minutes after the start of the meeting, let's say you start the meeting at 11 o'clock and it's supposed to go to 11:30, by what minute should you be closing up for next steps, date and time? What do you guys think? Put it in the chat. Anybody? 21, okay, 25, right. I would say 23. 23 minutes after you're going to start closing up for next steps, date and time. I can't tell you how many times I've observed sellers and they don't get to that because they're all involved in a discussion and the discussion is great. But then you get to 29 minutes after and then the prospect has to go. And then you haven't summarized anything. So whatever you're talking about at 23 minutes after, you're going to say, I'm watching the clock for you. I know we have 7 minutes left. Let's talk about next steps. I think we're going to need more time to finish this discussion. How does your time look on Friday at 10 o'clock? Date and time, date and time, date and time. If you get on the phone and someone says to you, hey, listen, I was just called into a meeting. I'm sorry, I didn't want to cancel on you, but I have like 5 minutes. What are you going to say to them? What's the one thing you're going to say to them? They have 5 minutes. What are you going to say? Date and time. That's right. You're going to get the date and time for the next meeting. You can cover a point or two if you want, or you could say to them, now that we have the date and time, why don't you take the next 3 minutes and go refill your coffee cup? And they will thank you. It'll help your relationship. Okay, that's the general meeting structure. If there are a lot of people from your side of the company on the call or their side of the company, just remember, introductions can eat up about 10 minutes. If you have a half an hour call, you eat up with 10 minutes, the introductions, you have to basically make your conversation like an accordion, right? How are you going to get to the date and time if you use 10 minutes? Slides and visuals, same thing. If you're showing a lot, you may not have, I remember one team, they got on a prospect call with 6 people and 40 slides for a 30-minute meeting. It's not doable. It's just not doable. So be careful about that meeting structure. And then here, after the meeting, what worked? What really worked? Because if something worked, let's document it so you remember for next time what didn't work. and what are the next steps and who is responsible for those, and certainly with the date and time. So we'll make this available to you guys. What else? We have just a few minutes left. We will take one more question, and then I'm going to summarize a little bit, and we'll have Perry summarize a little bit. One more question. What do you think? Who has a question? No questions? Answered everything? Okay. Who's going to call 2 more people when we get off the phone? Well, maybe not right away, have some lunch, but who's going to call 2 more people, new ones, this week?
Brad raising his hand.
Yeah, Luke is. Yep. Let's put it in the chat. Who's going to call? Any suggestions for people not calling or emailing back 3 or 4 times? Okay. Yes. The first thing is, when, there's prospect silence that happens in all different parts of the sales process. There is an article on my site. I think it's called Silence is Golden. And there's another one for 3 little words that remove prospect silence or something like that. Heather will make sure that Perry gets both of those. But what happens if somebody's not answering you and you've reached out 3 or 4 times and it's somebody who's brand new? The first thing is that person a good prospect for you? Like, maybe that person isn't the right person in the role. Maybe that person has left and they went to another company and that's why they're not answering. So the first thing to think about is target. Is that the right person for you? If it is the right person for you, take a look at the communication. What did you send in the LinkedIn? What did you send in the email? What did you say on the voicemail? Was it compelling enough? Or did you just say, I'd love to have a meeting, and you didn't tell them why that meeting would be the best decision they make all week? Because if that's the case, then that could be a reason why they didn't answer you. A lot of times it's one of those 2 things. It's either they're not the right person, or you didn't say something that was compelling enough for them to actually respond. So look there. The big offenders are right there. If you're saying something that's incredibly compelling and they're still not answering you, hang in there and keep trying. You may want to try a different approach, right? So if you've emailed only, call. If you've emailed and you called, hit them on LinkedIn. But remember not to pretend you have too close a relationship with somebody who you don't actually know, because that could be very off-putting, right? That you'll reach them there. Add in different success stories and different things that you've done for others, and give them reasons why, whether it's a success story or something you've noticed about a competitor, or something their CEO wrote in that CEO note, or something that's going on in the industry that other people are doing that this person may really need to know, and a reason why you have a conversation. The other thing, when you look at your communication, take a look at your ask. Your ask may not be clear. If you want a meeting, did you ask for one? Was it clear? Because sometimes people will be upset that someone hasn't reached back out to them, but they never actually told the prospect what they want. So if you want a meeting, you have to ask for one. And hopefully, do I have any recordings of me doing cold calls? Oh, gee, I would have to go back a long time ago, maybe. I don't know if I do. If I do, I'll send them to Perry. But you definitely want the 6-sentence voicemail. Hi, this is Caryn Kopp from Kopp Consulting. We do new business development, and we help our clients find new clients. One of our clients had 168 meetings and closed 55 new clients. So if meeting more prospects who are going to turn into clients is important to you this year, let's find time to have a conversation. My number is 908-781-7546, and I'm looking forward to speaking with you soon. So that's maybe just one. Yeah, let's go. So everybody, listen, if I could do it, everybody can do it. I'm here to tell you, I run a company of business developers who do business development for other people, and they are getting in the door, and you can too, right? You just need to remember that your prospects are people. They're people. Go slowly. Prospecting is a slow dance, and you need a relationship with them so that they will do business with you. And you can reach me If you have questions at my website, there I have a blog of years worth of content on almost every topic within sales, whether it's proposals or questions or tips for cold calling or tips for relationship building or centers of influence. There's something really on almost every topic there. My website is koppconsultingusa.com, K-O-P-P Consulting USA. And if you have a question, you can go to my website and put your question in and I will answer you. Perry, you want to bring us home?
Sure. Wonderful. Thank you, Caryn. What a awesome Q&A today. I really, truly, this has been very helpful. I feel from a lot of people. I've been getting some texts back and forth. So kudos to you. And thank everybody also who's been on this call, who's participated for the last 2 sessions, a total of 3 sessions. Thank you for making the time and investing in your future, making sure that you learn 1 or 2 things. I think there's at least 5 good things that I pulled out of this conversation in the last 3 sessions. So I'm really pumped. I will share all these resources that you're going to be handing over to me today. However, I got one caveat. I'm going to put them in the survey. So you fill out the survey and you'll get these things, because I need to measure the ROI on this meeting series. I need to show that we've hit home, or we need improvements, or what your feelings are, because this is how we evaluate the next steps for Reciprocity Road and how we grow our relationships with ourselves and our partners and develop our step forward. So you'll fill out the survey and I will gladly supply you with all these resources.
Right.
Yeah, so thank you guys. We're at the top of our time slot that we've allocated. We are recording it, and the recording will probably be available come Friday, after business hours on Friday, because we have to edit out a few parts. But look forward to it. It's been a great session. After we have the recording, we do post it on our portal. If anybody needs access to the portal, give me a shout out, and I'll help you out getting that hooked up. I hope we've covered everybody's questions and thoughts. Caryn, anything to take us home?
Yeah, well, you guys can do it. And I wish you all a wonderful, wonderful year full of all the new clients that you want and all the projects that you can handle. And if you have any questions, definitely reach out to me. Always happy to help. And I'm looking forward to seeing you guys again soon.
Great. Thank you. See you guys.
Bye, everybody.